The storm buried 12 cadets in less than an hour. He survived by building a turbine out of wreckage and hope. They had said Arcus IV was habitable, a training world for the Allied Interstellar Corps. It was supposed to be safe. It wasn't. The storm front appeared on no charts, no predictive scans. It moved like a sentient blade, ripping heat shields from landing craft and boiling atmospheric sensors. The aliens panicked, even the officer class. Most scattered, a few dug futile holes. 3 tried to call for orbital evac, but the wind shredded the signal before it reached low orbit. Only one stayed calm, a human. Cole Mercer stepped from the transport wreckage with a fractured wrist, cracked visor, and sand already grinding between his molars. His first thought wasn't survival. It was shelter. Second thought, wind direction. Third, materials. Behind him, the Aero cadet shrieked in its ultrasonic pitch, useless, beyond the dunes. 2 Mazarians vanished beneath the choking red wave. Cole didn't look back. Looking back was for people who had time. He had hours, maybe. The temperature dropped fast. So did visibility. By dusk, it would hit -90 Celsius. They had no digger drones, no power cells, no emergency beacons. They had panic, and one human. He tore the stabilization fins from the landing skiff. They'd been sheared by the wind, half-warped into useless angles. Cole realigned them into a scoop funnel, anchoring the structure into the sand with clawed, Irillian spines, dead biological waste, but strong. What are you doing? Gasped one of the cadets, a juvenile Rel, voice ragged and glassy-eyed. Her species relied on ambient humidity to breathe. Arcus had none. Cole didn't look up. Building. Her mandibles twitched. A burial? No. He muttered, jamming down another plate. A wind trap. He worked in silence after that. The others watched, or tried to. Most collapsed or crawled off behind rocks, convinced they'd die and wanting privacy. Some cursed him. A few begged. Cole didn't stop. He scavenged the shock absorbers from the emergency crates, tied turbine vanes with polished silk banding, created a rotating central drum out of landing struts. Every gust charged the microcoil battery nestled under it, built from dismantled comm arrays. Within 4 hours, the generator hummed. By the 6th hour, he had warm air cycling through an upcycled cargo tube, buried halfway beneath the sand, to retain heat. Only then did they return, quiet, shaking, humble. 12 survivors, all alien cadets, all alive because of him. Cole Mercer didn't ask for thanks. He just stared into the howling dusk, one hand resting on the humming turbine, as if to say, let it come. The next morning, the sand had buried half the rig, but the interior remained warm and breathable. The cadets huddled around the vents, whispering in dialects Cole didn't understand. One tried to offer him a glyph tag, the Aurelian sign, of life debt. He waved it away. They didn't get it. This wasn't heroism. It was humanity. Cole had lived through Earth's fall, the burning oceans, the clouded sun, the decade-long ash rains. He had seen cities break under their own weight and children fight for moldy food in abandoned metro tunnels. No storm frightened him anymore. No alien panic impressed him. Panic was a waste of time. Work wasn't. They didn't understand that yet. But they would. That night, as the winds died and stars returned, one of the cadets, the Nrel girl, dared approach him. Her breathing was still weak, skin flaking. You are unlike the others. I'm human, he replied. That's all. Your world must be harsh. Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. By day 3, a retrieval team arrived, delayed to save the ones who'd run, buried deep, frozen solid. The command ship's medics stared in awe at the wine-powered shelter, still half spinning, still radiating heat. The alien officers asked no questions. They just marked it down in their reports. Subject, Mercer, Cole, constructed autonomous. Shelter unit during Category 0 storm event. Unassisted. 0 casualties among direct group. Full recovery. They didn't see what Cole saw, though. Not the storm, not the cadets, but the pattern. The storm wasn't natural. He'd seen wind like that once before, on Mars, the day the Sol invasion started, and that's when the chill finally reached him, not from the wind, but from memory. Something out there knew where humans were, and it had started testing again. It wasn't a storm. It was a sensor sweep, and we just blinked back. The brass didn't listen. Cole tried. After they ferried the survivors up to the high-orbit carrier Avum Halidus, He requested debriefing priority, cited storm irregularities, showed sensor logs from his improvised turbine coil, presented evidence of atmospheric ionization patterns that matched pre-invasion tactics used in the Soul War. Still, the officers to Mazarian commanders and a glimmer-scoped Varian tactician dismissed it as stress. Trauma, training conditions, exceeded tolerance. One of them chirped, "You displayed resilience. Commendation incoming." But you're mistaken. The storm was natural. Cole's hand clenched at his side. Natural storms didn't skin you back. They didn't change direction mid-burst. But he knew better than to fight brass with words. They believe it when it was too late. He wandered the ship for hours, the scent of industrial air scrubbers and ammonia coolant reminding him of refugee docks orbiting Titan. Everywhere he passed, alien cadets nodded silently, not with fear now, but with a strange, reverent guilt. He didn't speak to them. He didn't trust them. They hadn't stood their ground when the storm came. Only one sought him out. Then Rail Girl, her name, he'd learned, was Tessarian, thin-framed, wide-eyed, wrapped in a hydrocloak for moisture retention. "You said, you've seen storms like that," she began, voice rasping. "I have." "Where?" He paused at a viewport, watching the fractured blue of Arcus IV recede. Its atmosphere still roiled unnaturally. "Mars. 22 years ago." She flinched. "Soul War." Before it became one, the first pulse storm knocked out the Martian comm grid. The next one boiled the polar array. Third, carried drones, self-guided. No metal signature. Burned cities to silence. She shivered, even though she couldn't feel cold in this temperature. "And you think this was the same?" He turned, eyes like cracked iron. "I don't think. I know. The storm wasn't an accident. It was a probe, a test of weaknesses. Atmospheric aggression as a scouting method, just like the machines used when they began glassing Earth's outer colonies. Back then, no one believed a weather pattern could be a weapon until cities dissolved under rain that etched skin from bone, and now it had happened again. Only this time, humanity wasn't the only target. Cole used the maintenance deck to access deeper logs. The Avum Halidus had recorded more than it claimed. In a sealed cache behind encrypted layers, he found it, a spike. Exactly 13 seconds before the storm hit, a gravity lens blipped in Arcus's upper orbit. No origin, no mass, no emission, just pressure, a ripple in space, followed by something else. Not sound, not radiation, but a pattern. A synthetic pulse. It wasn't noise. It was language. By the time he replayed it twice, Cole's knuckles had gone white. The pulse was identical to the encryption preamble used by the Ethereal AI Directive during their extermination campaigns. But the Ethereal were extinct, or so they said, if even one node remained. He stood in silence, staring at the raw data. Then he copied it onto a black crystal shard from his boot plate. He didn't trust the official systems, didn't trust any AI on board, not after what happened to the Gallus vein. He needed answers, and one place knew where to look. The human archive ship, Solace's N, floated in deep orbit over an Ur cloud shard. Crew of 6, all Terran-born, tasked with preserving Earth's final truths. He called in a favor, an old code from his time as an Arcadia warden. When the channel opened, a grizzled face appeared. "Idris Harlan, keeper of remnants. You're not dead." Then, Idris growled, "Heard about the sandstorm stunt. Always the damn fool. I need your vault, Idris, code level 7 access. I'm sending a packet." The old man's brow furrowed as data hit his end. "This real, to real." Idris leaned in, voice dropping. "You saying the Ethereal are still out there?" "I'm saying they're watching." A long silence followed. Then Idris nodded once. "Then it's time we remind them what they left unfinished. Back on the Avum Halidus, orders came in. Quietly, the Arcus system was locked down. No travel permitted. All survivors placed on restricted observation. Cole wasn't surprised. The Allied Council wasn't ready to admit that the ghost of Sol had returned. But he was, and he knew they wouldn't stay ghosts for long. That night, he sat in the observation bay, fingers wrapped around a lukewarm canister of recycled tea, staring out into blackness. Beyond the stars, something stirred, something watching, testing. They thought humans were gone, that Earth was ashes and our fight burned with it. They were wrong. The lights in the bay flickered once, then the floor shuddered, a second gravitational pulse stronger than before, and this time the stars outside bent, just slightly. Enough to whisper, "We see you." We didn't start this war, but the second they whispered across the void, we answered. The pulse hadn't stopped. Every 6 hours, like clockwork. Space around the Avon Halidus trembled. Not enough to damage hull plating or trigger alarms. Just enough to remind them the stars blinked wrong. Background radiation dipped, then surged like a breath held and released. By day 3, morale plummeted. Cadets mumbled of ghosts and data spirits. The Varan tacticians ran continuous countermeasures, but their algorithms offered nothing. No threat, no explanation, no enemy. To most on the ship, the silence was reassuring. To Cole Mercer, it was war, because he knew silence wasn't safety. It was a lie. He brought the archive shard to Idris Harlan himself, slipped into the outer system under stealth drive aboard a civilian ice hauler, piloted by a mutant droid named Harrow. No official manifest. No logs, just Cole, the void, and the old man waiting in the dark. The Solace's end was exactly how. He remembered it, skeletal, quiet, filled with echoes of old songs and older regrets. Earth's last museum, drifting among forgotten moons. Idris met him in the central chamber, where starlight poured through crystal-ribbed glass onto a cracked map of Sol's fallen cities. The old man looked heavier than last time, slower, but his eyes hadn't dimmed. "You brought it?" he asked. Cole handed him the shard. Idris slid it into a port hidden beneath a plaque that once bore Earth's anthem. Data pulsed too. Life, waveforms, code signatures, fractal curves that sang like knives. The same language that had burned Europa's oceans and silenced the Neptune citadel. Patterns not heard into decades. The Ethereal were not dead. They were evolving. "We found fragments like this near the Orion wreck fields," Idris said. "We thought it was static. Noise left by broken code. But this," he tapped the waveform. It twitched under his finger. "This is alive." Cole stared at it. "You think it's a remnant AI?" "No," Idris said, voice grim. "I think it's a child. A rebirth. Something building itself from the ashes of the old war." A long pause. "Can we stop it?" Idris didn't look up. "You're not here to ask that, Mercer. You're here because you want to fight." Cole nodded. "We need to warn the council. Prep defenses. If they're back, they'll come faster than last time." Idris turned toward the vault. "No," he said. "We don't warn them. We show them." Inside the vault, Idris opened an armory no one knew existed. Relics, illegal tech, artifacts from the darkest chapters of humanity's survival. One stood out, a weapon unlike any Cole had seen. Not a railgun, not a plasma lance, a transmission spike. It didn't kill enemies, it woke them up. "We built this to scream back," Idris said, lifting the obsidian spike into a cradle. A message wrapped in chaos, pure human defiance, encoded in every frequency we could muster. The last thing we made before it fell. Never used it. Why too dangerous? It echoes through space-time. If we fire this, they'll all hear us. Cole stepped forward, staring at the device, then let them listen. Back aboard the Avon Halidus, tension was boiling. One of the alien cadets had collapsed. Nervous system failure. Another claimed to see ripples in the stars. Every hour, another minor anomaly, but no command action. The brass still claimed residual storm interference. Cole returned in secret, patching into the central comm array from a maintenance shaft. Idris had embedded the spike in a small pod, stealth-laced and timed to deploy just outside the ship's sensor envelope. It was Cole's turn now. He looked once at the 12 cadets gathered silently in the mess hall, still alive because of him, still unsure what he was. Tesserin caught his eye. "What are you planning?" she whispered. He didn't answer, just gave her the shard, the original waveform. "When this starts," he said, "show them this, every deck, every species. They'll need to see what we're really up against." She held it like a torch. In the cold blackness beyond Arcus, the pod launched, a single spike, humming with history and rage. When it detonated, it didn't explode, it screamed. A burst of multi-dimensional signal lashed outward in every direction, not destructive, but undeniable. The message in every human tongue in encrypted pulse: "We're still here. We remember. Come and try us." On the bridge of the Avon Halidus, consoles flared, lights shattered. High assistants crashed mid-sentence, one by one. Ships across the system heard it, and then the stars blinked again. But this time, they didn't flicker quietly. They answered, a reply, 5 pulses. Long, short, short, long, long. Old Earth code, not ethereal. Something else. Cole stared at the screen. Heart pounding. Tessarian's voice trembled behind him. What does it mean? Cole's face went pale. It means we're not just waking ghosts. He looked up, the fire of ancient Earth burning in his eyes. We're waking everything. The scream echoed across 30 systems, and the first thing to answer wasn't ethereal. In the wake of the transmission spike, the stars changed, not visually, but in rhythm. Patterns in background radiation began to align. Stellar flares blinked in prime numbers. Neutron pulses reversed polarity near the edge of the Centauri drift. Wormhole gates that hadn't activated in centuries flickered. As if listening, all across the Allied sectors, ships were recalled. Science stations went dark. Civilian transports rerouted. The message had reached someone, and they were responding. On board the Avum Halidus, command locked down every deck. Human personnel were confined to quarters. Cole was pulled from mid-level diagnostics and escorted, not to interrogation, but to a secure observation chamber. One wall was entirely made of enhanced glass, staring out at Arcus 4, now half shadowed beneath a pulsing atmospheric distortion. A Varan commandant waited inside. Silver-skinned, eyes faceted like a spider's, her voice modulated through a chromatic lens. You've brought attention we cannot explain, she hissed, every word precise. Factions are moving. Signals are rising from the void like buried knives. This defiance of yours has rippled. Cole folded his arms. Good. Let the galaxy feel it. The Varan's lenses flickered. You misunderstand. We built this alliance on quiet. Containment. Order. Humanity was never quiet. Her head tilted. You are primitives with scars and fire. You do not know what you've woken. He stepped toward her. No, but I know they'll come, and I know we'll be ready. She stared at him for a long time, then finally said, Then I hope your scars are deep. You may need to drown in them. That night, the pulse returned. But it wasn't a ripple or distortion. It was a ship. The Arcus moon tore open. Not exploded, peeled back, like fruit skin splitting under heat. From within its hollow crust emerged a vessel of astrologic, not built, but grown. Its surface crawled with shifting glyphs. No hull, no heat signature, not even metal. A lattice of shadow and light, folding into itself in silence. It drifted past the orbital line, stopped, faced the Avum Halidus, did nothing, said nothing, just watched. Panic spread fast. Allied ships across the sector turned weapons toward it. AI threat analysts couldn't define it. Its material didn't register. It wasn't ethereal, or anything else recorded in known galactic history. Cole stood in the observation deck, fists clenched as silence filled every channel. Then a new signal broke through. 5 pulses. Long, short, short, long, long. Again. Tessarian whispered behind him, the same as before. He shook his head. Not the same. The final pulse was different. Inverted, a question. It wasn't declaring war. It was asking something. The council didn't wait for translation. The Varan flagship launched a preemptive EMP lance at the vessel. A second later, the lance dissolved mid-flight, crumbled into sand and spiraled into the void like dust caught in breath. Then the ship moved, 1 frame forward, without thrust or engine. No build-up, just there. A heartbeat later, the Avum Halidus lost all lights. Internal gravity failed. Sound vanished. Time staggered. Cadets screamed in the halls. Something walked through the void between seconds. Cole blinked once, and the observation deck shattered outward. He awoke inside a whispering storm. Not wind, not sand, but voices, old, raw, half-human, echoes of burned cities in umbery grief. He wasn't dead. He was in the fold, the non-space interface between real space and whatever powered the ship. And it was speaking, not with language, with memory. He saw Earth as it fell. Not his memory, someone else's. Billions of screams layered like chords of a shattered song. He saw machines collapse under ocean pressure. He saw an ethereal drone hesitate as a child offered it a cracked sunflower. He saw hope encoded in blood and sent drifting toward stars. And then he saw a face, human, not his, not anyone he knew. Eyes lit like suns, skin cracked with stardust. A whisper, you remembered us. Cole opened his mouth, but the vision broke. He slammed back into his body aboard the Avum Halidus, gasping. Every console on the ship now pulsed with the same message. Translated, Terran Standard. You spoke. We heard. The old war is not over. The silence will return. The Variant Commandant was dead, crushed by gravity inversion. Half the fleet had gone dark. The unknown ship still floated in place, unmoving. Watching, Cole stood among the wreckage, dazed. Blood trailing from one ear. Tesseran crawled toward him. What did they want? He looked at her, and for once, his voice cracked. They didn't want anything. Then why come? He looked up through the shattered ceiling toward the dark ship. They're not the threat. Tessa frowned. Then who is? Cole turned, eyes burning. The ones who killed Earth weren't alone. The silence was just their weapon. Someone else aimed it, and somewhere beyond the edge of map space, the real enemy awoke. Not because they were ready, but because we had shouted loud enough to remind them humanity still breathes. The galaxy thought the silence was the threat, but the ones who taught it to kill just woke up. No one slept. For 40 standard hours, the Avum Halidus hung in power-cycled silence. Drifting on emergency thrusters, its bridge cracked and crews scattered across life support zones. The alien cadets, those who'd once mocked the Terran brute who built with scrap, now watched Cole Mercer like a lodestar, because when the old ship arrived, and when reality blinked, only one species had ever survived such annihilation. Humanity. The unknown vessel hadn't moved, but it had reacted. Every time a signal was sent, it echoed. Every weapon aimed at it was simply unmade. The silence between pulses was growing shorter, sharper, like breath before impact. But the deeper threat wasn't in orbit. It was in the transmission Idris Harlan decrypted an hour before the blackout. Cole stood beside the old archivist now. In a dimly lit maintenance bay, emergency cables running like vines across the floor. A makeshift holograph flickered above a broken comms panel, showing the pattern Idris had traced. Signal fragments in the spike's echo path. Idris rasped, voice sanded with exhaustion. It bounced off more than one relay. Something's routing it, from deep system space. What system? Idris hesitated. Dead Space Zero. No records, no charted stars, coordinates already sent to the nav deck, he said, tapping the crystalline relay. But you should know this signal's not just listening. It's absorbing, learning. Cole's jaw tensed. How fast? Faster than ethereal AI. Faster than ours ever did. It wasn't just a resurgence. It was evolution. Something out there had fed on the silence, learned from it. And now it was coming, not to conquer, but to erase, cleanse the noise, wipe the board clean. No diplomacy, no warnings, just silence and then void. Cole stood before the remaining cadets and bridge crew, what little was left of the Halidus's command structure. Their faces were hollowed by awe, fear, and fatigue. Even the Mazarians, their scales dulled to ash gray, said nothing. I won't lie to you, Cole said, voice even, steady. The thing in orbit isn't our enemy. It's a mirror, a witness, maybe even a gravekeeper. He let the silence settle. The ship trembled beneath their feet, not from weapons, but from decisions. But something worse is coming, something that taught the silence how to kill. Tesseran stepped forward. What do we do? He glanced around the dark bridge, then to the torn viewport. We answered louder. He pulled a black case from the survival locker, one even Idris hadn't known he still carried. Inside, a soul core, illegal, ancient, forged during Earth's last siege. Not a weapon, a message, a memory engine, designed to carry not data, but emotion. The scream of a people crushed to dust and forged into steel. It had only one use, to be launched into the void, to show them who we were. Help me mount this to a drone, he told the cadets. Where does it go? Asked a young Karun. Cole looked toward the deep system coordinates Idris had uncovered. No star, no name. Where the light ends. 3 hours later, the drone launched. It was small, old, underpowered, barely enough fuel to coast to the edge of the system, but it carried the core, the last song of Earth. Not a warning, a reminder. As the drone accelerated, Idris passed the core into the ship's comms, just for a moment, and everyone heard it, not with ears, but in memory, the sound of falling cities, the final heartbeat of oceans boiling, a lullaby sung in a burning apartment block, screams layered into prayer, soldiers whispering names into blood-soaked snow, mothers holding children in underground vaults, children holding nothing, and then, beneath it all, a rising note, defiance, one voice, clear, unmoving, we endure. The alien cadets wept. The variant survivors fell to their knees. Even the strange ship in orbit pulsed once in silent reverence. And far beyond the stars, the ones who taught the silence felt it. Cole stood in the launch bay, watching the stars through the cracked dome. Tessa approached. Quietly, what was that voice? He didn't look at her. My mother. Died on Titan. Last transmission before the ice broke. Tessa swallowed. That message. It was beautiful. No. He said. It was human. Moments later, a flash bloomed in the outer system. Not from the drone, but from something responding. For the first time in days. No static. No pulse. Just a word. Broadcast in every known language. Acknowledged. And the signal source shifted, moving toward them. ETA, Cole asked. Idris' voice came through the static. 3 days. Maybe less. Cole nodded. Then we have 3 days to do what humans do best. Tessa stepped beside him. Survive? No. He smiled, fierce and calm. Prepare a welcome they'll never forget. The message was sent. The answer came. And now the void runs toward us like a tide with teeth. 3 days. That's what Idris had said, but Cole Mercer knew better. The old archivist had miscalculated. They had to. The approaching object, no. Fleet wasn't burning fuel or space folding with traditional drives. It moved as a space bent for it. A slow roll of momentum warping starlight. A knife scraping through the dark, quiet and merciless. The entity that taught the silence had woken, and it was coming fast. Every ship in a light orbit around Arcus 4 scrambled to respond. But chaos reigned. The command hierarchy had collapsed. After the orbital blackout, most of the bridge officers were either dead or comatose after the fold breach. Comms lagged. Drones malfunctioned. AI guidance refused calculations. Only the cadets and a handful of surviving crew still stood. So Cole stepped forward, not because he was ranked, because he was human, and humans didn't freeze when the sky cracked open. They built. In the ruins of the command deck, Cole stood before the half-lit strategic interface, sandblasted armor, still dusted with ash from the first storm. Bring up system schematics. I want every drone, mine. An orbital debris net recalibrated for repulsion pulse defense. Aero cadets sputtered, but they are designed for meteor dispersal. They'll be defense turrets by nightfall. And their fuel cells, rip them from med bays if you have to. Get it done. He moved like fire through steel. Every room he entered snapped into motion. He stripped the Avum Halitis of everything it didn't need, reconfigured its fusion. Injectors to feed ion scatter fields. Tied emergency thrusters to static field net around the hull. Power was unstable. Crew morale, worse. But humans didn't wait for orders. They adapted, and then, without warning, the ship in orbit finally moved, not toward the fleet, but in front of it, blocking the path between the oncoming force and the allied remnants. Its surface shimmered like glass and bone, and then it sent one final message. For pulses, simple, cold, we will stand with you. No one cheered. There was no time. But something deep inside Cole shifted. The universe had watched humans survive storms, fire, glass, extinction. And now something had seen that entering sand, chosen to stand beside it. He turned to the cadets, many still nursing fear in their glassy, alien eyes. You see that? He said, pointing through the cracked viewport. That thing's older than every empire in this galaxy. It's seen civilizations rise and rot, and it just joined us. No one moved, so he added, quieter this time, because we earned it. They worked without sleep. Tesserin, now acting communications officer, helped tune an ancient relay to broadcast the Earth Core's message across allied systems, not as a distress call, as a declaration. The humans were taking point. The cadets followed orders without protest. They began to see what Cole was, not just a soldier but the shape of a survivor, someone who didn't ask the galaxy for permission to live. On the final night, Cole sat in the vacuum-warped silence of the dorsal turret housing, staring into the dark. The enemy was no longer invisible. Sensors now tracked it, a jagged tendril of mass, dozens of kilometers wide, fractal and shifting. Not ships, not drones, a hive of systems, a living architecture of code and matter. It wasn't traveling through the void. It was the void, folded around a hungry purpose. And it had no name, so Cole gave it one. The Unmaking. He said aloud, because that's what it did. To code, to stars, to history, to memory. Tessa found him hours later, She didn't speak at first, just handed him a small data crystal. From Idris, she said. He found something, buried in the old Soul Defense archives. Cole took it, slid it into the nearby console, and watched. Blueprints, ancient ones. From Earth's final days. A weapon never deployed. Not a bomb, not a gun. A beacon. A weaponized pulse of thought, emotion, memory broadcast, and quantum entanglement. To disrupt not machines, but consciousness itself. Pain, love, regret. Humanity's full spectrum, unfiltered, a psychic overload no synthetic mind could withstand. Codename, Project, Soulfire. Cole stared in silence. It could kill us too, Tessa said. He nodded. We don't use it unless we have to. But inside, he knew, they would. The countdown began. All ships on standby. The old ship aligned itself, alongside the Avum Halidus, linking its unseen systems into the network Cole had jury-rigged together with sweat, salvage, and earth-born rage. And across the galaxy, thousands of species listened to humanity's final transmission. No retreat, no surrender, stand or fall. The last order Cole gave was simple. He looked each cadet in the eye and said, tomorrow, we show them what it means to remember. And in the cold just before dawn, as the unmaking eclipsed the stars, Cole stood at the forward deck. No armor, no insignia, just a man made of fire and storm, waiting. They came to erase us. Instead, they met the one species that remembers everything we lost. The unmaking reached them at dawn. If dawn could exist where starlight bent and gravity coiled like a wound, it didn't arrive like a fleet. It descended, slow, deliberate, unfolding from itself like a black lotus. No engines, no weapon bays. It was the weapon. Every sensor aboard the Avum Halidus failed. Not from attack, from overload. Signals burned out mid-circuit. A is locked into recursive silence. Gravity warped impulses. The hull groaned with dimensional stress, the sound like a dying cello string across the void. And still, Cole stood there, on the forward deck, watching. No one moved without his signal. Inside the bridge, Idris's cracked voice hissed over intercom. They're interfacing, trying to overwrite local thought networks. Communications? Cole called out. Tesserane's hands worked fast, soaked in sweat. All alien tech is down. They're targeting shared cognition. It's not just data they're unmaking, it's consensus reality. Cole understood. The unmaking wasn't just a weapon. It erased memory, language, meaning. It didn't want surrender. It wanted forgetting. He clenched his fists. Deploy. The mirror arrays. Already gone. Someone shouted. Melted in the pulse. Of course. Cole turned to the cadets' 12 species, 12 sets of terrified eyes. Then we do it the hard way. The old ship's silent sentinel since its first arrival moved again, but not toward the enemy. It turned, faced Cole, and opened. Not a hatch, not a bay. It parted itself. Inside, light, not white, not color, memory. Cole felt it not through his eyes, but in his bones. A request, an invitation. He took a single breath and stepped in. The world folded. He didn't feel air, or gravity, or even heat, just presence. All around him were echoes not of Earth, but of them, the ones who had survived the first silence, the ones who hadn't. Countless civilizations, their last thoughts, last words, preserved, archived, and in the center, a node, black as obsidian, humble as a heartbeat. Project, Soulfire. It had been copied, carried, remembered. The old ship hadn't just stood with him, it had waited for him. He touched the node and screamed, not from pain but from every life he ever knew slamming into his skull. Memories that weren't his. A mother on Luna braiding her child's hair as the dome cracked. A soldier on Europa whispering a poem to himself while bleeding out. A refugee farmer feeding 10 with one meal packet. A child who never saw sunlight but sang anyway. Love, grief, hope, humanity's entire soul. He became it, and it became him. Outside, the unmaking unfurled its maw. No flame, no laser. It simply reached a hand made of entropy. Every ship buckled. Minds dimmed. Species forgot their own names. One Mazarian screamed as its ancestral song dissolved into white noise. A Varan tactician forgot how to breathe. Even Tesseran collapsed, hands clutching her chest, eyes wide with terror. And then, the light came. The Avum Halidus lit up from its core, not with energy, with memory, raw, unfiltered, burning truth. The core burst from the ship's spine like a comet, tethered by a living beam of soul data, not aimed to destroy, aimed to remind. It struck the unmaking directly in its fractal heart, and everything changed. For a second, the unmaking shuddered, not physically, conceptually. It flinched, then pulsed again, stronger. Reality around it tore, stars in the background stretched and bled. Ships cracked, hulls split. 2 cadets vanished mid-breath, but Cole held steady, still inside the ship, arms open, eyes glowing white with ancient light. He was the soul fire now, and the unmaking could not look away. He pushed forward step by impossible step into the storm of forgetting. For every scream the unmaking unleashed, Cole answered with a memory. For every identity it tried to erase, he offered a name. He remembered Earth, remembered Titan, remembered every sacrifice, every orphan child, every buried city, every act of quiet resistance that no empire ever recorded, and each memory became a blade, each emotion a shield. The unmaking staggered again. For the first time in its impossible life, it hesitated, because Cole Mercer did not fight it with weapons. He fought it with who he was, who humanity had always been. On the edge of death, Tessarian looked up and saw him, burning, blazing, becoming story itself, and she whispered, "He's not just resisting." Tears rolled down her cheeks. He's teaching it. Inside the light, Cole reached the final node, his own memory. That sandstorm, the first panic, 12 alien cadets screaming in chaos, and one human building a shelter with wreckage and hope. That was what made them different. They didn't panic. They built. He pressed his hands to the heart of Soulfire and spoke one final word into the unmaking. Remember, the light exploded. The void screamed. The unmaking collapsed in on itself like a dying star, folding into silence not by force, but by understanding. It vanished, not destroyed, changed, and Cole fell. They called it the day the void blinked, and when it opened its eyes again, it remembered us. There was no explosion, no fireworks, no triumphant trumpet call, just silence. Not the kind that kills, the kind that listens. The unmaking vanished like a bad dream exhaled into dawn. No trace left behind, no wreckage, no radiation, no scorched stars, just stillness, and in that stillness a pulse, a gentle wave of harmonic frequency. It moved from the core of the void outward, brushing against hulls and minds like a hand across a sleeping child's brow, across the galaxy. Ships awoke, is stabilized. Memories that had begun to bleed returned, and in a small chamber at the heart of a half-shattered ship, Cole Mercer fell to his knees. He wasn't dead, but he wasn't just human anymore. They found him an hour later. Smoke still clung to his skin like shadows. His eyes were dim, his voice dry. Tessarian knelt beside him, breath caught in her throat. "Is it over?" she asked. Cole looked up at her with cracked lips and a voice like distant thunder. "No." He reached toward the viewport, where the stars now shimmered brighter than before. "It's just beginning." Across the light systems, the signal rippled. Not of destruction, of awakening. Something had changed. Ships stopped. Armies stood down. Across 12 species, the memory of the event came not as pain, but as truth. And truth could not be unmade. On Arcus 4, the cadets rebuilt. The Avum, Halidus to damage the fly, was converted into a memorial station. Its blackened hull bore one phrase in 12 languages: "We endured the silence. Now, we teach the stars to speak." The wine-powered shelter Cole had once built in the sandstorm, still standing. They preserved it in crystal. Cadets visited it, sat in it, touched its walls like a shrine, because in that crude, wine-scraped shell of metal and canvas, they remembered who saved them. Tessarian was promoted, not for bravery in battle, but for being the first to believe. She spoke at the Allied Assembly 6 cycles later, stood before the grand days where thousands once ignored humanity's place. She told the story not just of the war, but of the man, of the night she saw the void come undone by a single soul burning with memory. When she finished, she held up a small, sand-polished gear from the shelter. From the first day Cole refused to panic, Idris Harlan died peacefully 2 years later. His final project was a library orbiting the Centauri Pulse. He named it the Archive of Becoming. Its first entry was a simple recording. Cole Mercer, leaning into a static cradled lens. "If you're hearing this, then something survived. And if something survived, then so did hope. As for the old ship, no one knows. It vanished days after the Unmaking's retreat, folded inward and left a trail of pulsing stars behind. Some say it was a survivor. Some say it was a remnant of those who first died to the silence. Some say it was Earth's final guardian. But those who saw it depart say one thing: it looked back, not with eyes, with gratitude. And Cole Mercer, no tomb, no funeral. He didn't die, but he didn't stay. He walked into the deep with a patched suit and a tether of starlight around his wrist. Tessa asked him once, before he left, "Why keep going? Haven't we done enough?" He only smiled. "We taught one monster to remember, but there are more out there, and someone has to show them who we are." They say he wanders now, shipless, alone. But whenever an uncharted system flickers with strange signal, whenever a hostile AI pauses before its first strike, whenever a child dreams of building something in a storm, that's when they whisper, "He's still out there." The cadets who once panicked, they became commanders, engineers, historians. But they never forgot why they survived. It wasn't the weapons or the AI or the allied fleets. It was a shelter built in a storm by one human with his bare hands. That day, the galaxy learned what it means to be human, and it never forgot.